Greetings, everyone. My name is David McLeod, and I am your life mastery coach, author of the delightful little book, A Life to Die For, and also author of the brand new #1 international best-selling book, The Gifts of Wisdom, Practices for Healing and Empowerment. Welcome to Life Mastery TV, your source for inspiration, empowerment, and fulfillment. Today, we are doing episode 258, and our topic title today is Unearthing Hidden Treasure. Now, for many people, the idea of facing parts of ourselves that we have repressed or denied can seem overwhelming or even dangerous. Often these shadows are associated with painful experiences, traumas, or social conditioning that led us to believe that certain emotions, thoughts, or behaviors were unacceptable. To make matters worse, we live in a society that frequently encourages suppression rather than exploration, leading individuals to believe that uncovering their shadows might reveal something bad or unworthy about themselves. Ironically, it turns out that deep introspection into the psychic shadow often yields extraordinary rewards. By shining a light on the parts of ourselves we've hidden, we gain a more complete understanding of who we truly are. But in addition, the shadow harbors not only wounds, but also gifts, creativity, courage, authenticity, and depth, to name just a few, that have been suppressed alongside the painful wounds. Integrating these aspects can lead to profound personal growth, self-compassion, and emotional resilience. For today's episode of Life Mastery TV, I've invited a newcomer to the program, and she's going to join me in a lively discussion about my favorite topic, the shadow. Linda Dieffenbach is a trauma-informed energy healer and transformational coach with over 15 years of experience. As someone who has dedicated her life to creating heart-centered safe spaces, Linda is an ideal guest for helping people to become acquainted with their deepest hidden parts. So please join me in welcoming Linda Dieffenbach to the program today.
Hi.
Hi, Linda, and welcome to Life Mastery TV. Thank you for embarking on this journey with me and joining me.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, well, as I said in my little intro there, shadow is definitely my favorite topic to talk about. But it wasn't always that way. Now, I know I have my story that led me to the interest in the shadow. I'd like to find out a little bit about your story. What was it that happened in your life that led you to start contemplating this idea of shadow and what it means in your life?
It was so I carried a lot of childhood trauma, and there was so many parts of myself that I had abandoned, disconnected, dissociated with through the different events that had occurred in my life. I literally shut down myself and just put on the mask of I'm going to be who I think other people want me to be, because nobody's accepting me as I am.
Right.
And I spent a lot of time just disempowered and lost and confused and frustrated and scrambling to find some kind of help because I didn't know where to find it. And I didn't, of course, have any concept of the shadow or any type of healing work at all, other than like going to traditional psychotherapy and such, which was not really helpful for me. And when I met one of my mentors, Elizabeth Frediani, in just starting to work with her, she does energy healing through the chakra system and among many other amazing things. But when I first started working with her, one of the things that was phenomenal to me was she was so able to cut through that mask and cut through the smoke and mirrors and all of the things that I was hiding behind and actually see me and help me see myself. And even just that initial period of working with her over like my first few sessions with her was a series of 3 sessions, and I made more progress in that time frame than I had in a lifetime of other types of therapy and support work. And
Fantastic.
she's amazing.
Mhm.
And she invited me to actually train with her, which was a phenomenal experience. And that's when I was first introduced from a conceptual level to the shadow and to the reality of how we disown parts of ourselves. And that was a huge eye opener for me because I didn't know that I had done this. But once I learned about it, I was eager to explore this because I felt so disconnected. I felt so lost, and I was so afraid to be seen. Like, this conversation would never have happened 20 years ago because there's no way I would have allowed anybody to see me.
Right.
And that just led me on this really profound, deep personal journey to explore those parts of myself and try to learn, how did this happen? Because at that point I didn't understand trauma either. I knew that there were difficult things to happen in my life, but I didn't understand how it affected me. I didn't understand what trauma was. I didn't even really, I had been told that my life was great and there was nothing wrong with my life. So everything that was wrong must have been me. So I wasn't really even allowed to look at my trauma. And so this journey, and this was certainly not a short journey. I mean, I've spent years, and I'm still in this process. We're all still in the healing process, but I spent a lot of years just diving into the past and trying to learn and discover ways in which I disowned myself and separated from myself and negated myself and disowned my power. And it was like a personal excavation is a good way to think about it. It's like an archaeological dig into the soul. But that journey helped me find my personal power. It helped me find my voice. It helped me recreate, maybe that's not the right word, but it helped me really shift and transform the way I showed up in my life, how I showed up in my relationships. And it helped me to unravel and unwind and reverse a lot of the damage that had been done through the trauma I had experienced, so that I could feel more like a whole person. And so that I could have relationships that were actually healthy and supportive and where I was actually seen and supported within it, rather than being mistreated, abused, not loved, not seen, not cared for. Like, that was my theme. And it shifted all of that.
Right. So first of all, thank you for sharing that. I know that, well, for some people, it's really difficult to open up and be vulnerable like that. But I want to thank you for doing that and sharing that. If I have some questions that I want to add, but before I do that, I'd just like to kind of summarize in my own words what I think I heard you say.
Yeah.
So as I understand it, when you were young, you had some situations that happened that led you to believe that you were unloved, that people didn't accept you for who you are, and that the only way for you to survive in this world was to put on these masks and costumes and, layers to try and appear the way you thought other people wanted you to appear. Is that correct? Right.
Yeah, pretty much.
Now, first of all, I want to say that experience is probably common to 95% or more of all children. And the real truth is, and this is something that it took me a long time to really come to realization, because I had a very strong hatred towards my mother for a long time until I did my shadow work. And I then, when I reconnected to the truth of who I really am, I realized at that point, my mom, it wasn't true that my mom didn't love me. It wasn't true that she didn't accept me. It's that I interpreted some of her behaviors in my immature way that led me to do things to protect myself. So that's the thing that people need to understand, that most parents are not deliberately malicious, horrible beings in your life. You know, most parents are actually very loving, caring people. It's just that they see things differently than we do as children, and they may ask us or tell us to do things that we don't really want to do because they want to keep us safe. You know. So anyway, I guess my reason for mentioning that is because that's going to come out a little bit later in our conversation. Um, so anyway, you found a way to, you connected with this person who helped you take a deeper look at yourself. You said she cut through the, I was going to throw in the word bullshit, but I thought, no, I'm not going to say that because it was true for you at the time. She cut through the layers and she could see the real you. And you thought, oh my God, what's going on? Right? I know that certainly happened for me too. When people can see through the facades down to the real you, which is what you really want anyway, right? And yet it seems so foreign and so strange and maybe uncomfortable because, whoa, this is not what I expected. And yet, little by little, you start connecting back into the true essence of who you really are. And you begin to say, wow, this is a pretty amazing being. I'm a pretty amazing being. I should be showing all of this to everybody all the time. And that's what the process of shadow work actually does for people. You know? Now, that doesn't mean we all go around and we share every vulnerable secret that we've ever had in our lives. No, it just means that we're not afraid of those secrets anymore. And if necessary, we'll reveal them in the appropriate place in order to, just stay connected to the truth of who we really are. So kudos to you for doing that. And so the question I want to ask you, have I summarized that pretty accurately, by the way? I just want to make sure.
For the most part, yeah. I think it's pretty good.
Okay. Yeah. So the question that I have for you, I'm making the assumption that while you're still in the process of doing this work, you have pretty much reconnected to that true essence of Linda, the true essence. You know who you are now. You're much clearer on that. How do you feel now compared to how you felt before you started doing this work?
I feel like a whole person. I feel like I have value. I feel like I have a voice in the world. I feel like I can give voice to my needs. There was most of my life, I couldn't even identify my own needs and wants. You asked me if I wanted something, and I'm like, I don't know, whatever you want,
Yep.
Like I didn't know what mattered to me. I didn't really have a clear idea of my values. I've even come to realize I didn't even really know sometimes what I liked and disliked, because I would shift, to meet the other person or people to ensure that I was likable, that I was acceptable, that I was okay. And so acquiescing to their likes and dislikes, their needs, I was going to say I was a shadow,
Right.
which in a different context, but yeah, I mean, I was kind of a void in many ways because I wouldn't allow myself to connect with that authenticity of who I am. And now I feel like I can do that. I know who I am. I know what's important to me. I know what my values are. I can stand up for myself when I need to. I can hold boundaries for myself and say no or yes or whatever. I feel like a whole person, where I was a facade before.
I mean, that's beautiful, really. And the reason I asked you to share that is because, well, first of all, I had a very, very similar experience. In fact, a lot of your descriptions of, your journey mirror many of my own. The idea of trying to appear the way I imagine other people want me to be. Absolutely. I did that in spades, for a good part of my life. And I guess on some level it actually worked. It allowed me to make my way to where I needed to be in order to do the work to get back to the truth of who I am. All of those steps were necessary, right? But I think you're absolutely right. There's a whole difference now in the way I see myself compared to the way I saw myself 25, 30 years ago, you know? And I actually have reached a point now where I really love myself. Whereas before, I really was miserable and I could not actually say with any truth, I love myself. Sure, I could say the words, but didn't feel it at all, you know? So I don't know. Did that sort of thing happen for you?
Being able to love myself, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
I loathed myself.
Right.
Even to the point where I attempted to take my life at one point.
Yep.
Because
Been
I
there
felt
too.
like everything that was wrong in the world was me.
Right.
Everything that I was being told countered my truth, countered my reality, and therefore it must have been me that was the problem, and therefore I attempted to take my own life. I certainly was not loving myself then, and that was, I can say honestly, that was the time where I can literally pinpoint after that event, closing the door on myself and locking myself away. Because at that time, everybody told me that, there was, I was literally told that my suicide attempt was not real.
Oh, wow.
And that it was simply attention-seeking behavior. And that told me in that moment that, okay, I'm the problem.
Yeah, you're getting the message. It doesn't matter what I do.
Yeah. And so on that, I certainly had no love for myself. I had no compassion for myself. I was very harsh in how I judged myself and criticized myself and would pick apart. You and many others probably have this experience. Like, I would have a conversation or I would do something that would create any type of little ripple of conflict or threaten my facade, and I would pick myself apart. And I would replay over and over again in my mind, what I did wrong and how terrible it was. And I would just judge myself so harshly. Every little thing I did, I judged critically. And I endeavor to not do that anymore. I mean, sure, there's always self-judgment that kind of creeps up, but I'm aware of it now. And when I hear it, when I notice it, I step back and I observe it and say, okay, what is this? Where is it coming from? Rather than diving into the rabbit hole of self-abuse.
Yeah. I mean, everything you're saying, it's hard to believe that you and I have basically followed the same path. Obviously, some of the details are different. I reached that very, very low point in my life where suicide became a serious thought process. And the only thing that kept me from doing it was the thought of leaving my three children without a father. That was the only thing that stayed my hand. If it hadn't have been for them, we wouldn't be having this conversation today. So, and I'm so grateful that I went through that, because it really taught me, as I started uncovering all the twisted and convoluted belief systems that I had, and started understanding how I had gotten the way I was. It really helped me understand the value of my life for me. And I came to the realization that it really doesn't matter what other people think. It doesn't matter how they judge me. None of that is going to change who I am. They're going to have their judgments, or they're not. So I might as well let go of the judgments. Sure, I can take feedback and I can look for ways to improve. That's all great. But no more harsh judgment, nothing but self-love. That's really the goal that I try to accomplish every day now, and I'm sure you're doing the same. But it's something that is difficult to do until we are willing to look into those dark places inside.
Yeah, it's really impossible to do until you do that.
I agree with you. You and I know that it's impossible, but many people say, "Oh, no, I don't need to do that. I can just read this book, or I can just go to this workshop, or I can just meditate, or I can just do yoga or whatever. And while all of those are great things and they serve a powerful purpose, they really don't get you in touch with the truth of who you are. Meditation, maybe, if you allow yourself to meditate deeply enough.
Yeah.
But I think it's still really, to do good, successful excavation, to use your word, really requires the help of an expert. You know, someone who can guide you and can keep you safe while you're doing this work.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And because you can't see your own blind spots, you need somebody to help you do that. And you need somebody who knows how to do it and somebody who can facilitate that in a safe way. One of the things I want to circle back to, and I know we talked about this before the class, but just in talking about this process of coming to self-love, we were talking about Heart IQ and Christian Pankhurst, and one of the things that drew me so strongly to his work was the way he described heart intelligence, which was the act of learning to love yourself in every moment, like no matter what, without making yourself wrong. Like love and accept yourself wholly and completely when you're in your mess and you're in your shit, and when you are in your brilliance, and loving yourself no matter what. And that like drew me to his work so powerfully.
Yeah. There are a lot of teachers like that who really resonate with me. Hello, Denise. Welcome. You're welcome to post your questions in the chat if you like, and we'll be happy to, or your comments or whatever. We'll be happy to answer any questions as well. The idea. I mean, I think most people are quite satisfied to just live their lives, you know, and just do the best they can, and they put up with all of the societal crap that they have to deal with, and then just try to make ends meet and all this. And I find that kind of sad. I think there's just an army of unfulfilled people in the world right now. And I'm just trying to imagine what it would be like if everybody could learn to do enough of this work to just at least get to that place of loving themselves completely. Can you imagine how the world would change if that happened?
Exponentially.
Yeah. And I think that, well, the way I describe it, it's really getting to know the truth of who you really are. Well, you can't know the truth of who you really are until you do a deep dive, uncover all the dark stuff, and look underneath. You know, open up the hood, find out how that engine runs, figure out how that gunk got there, clean the gunk away, and discover that beautiful purring engine that just wants to drive you forward with huge passion. I mean, I get so excited when I talk about this stuff.
Well, the inner work is so key, and it's so powerful. And what's, you know, the challenge is that it's terrifying for most people.
Yeah.
You know, and I know that it was for me when I was younger, the idea of doing the deep work and going inside and looking at myself, and, you know, the concept of even beginning to try to love myself was very foreign, but to touch that pain and go into those deep, vulnerable spaces was terrifying. And part of the terror for me was I was afraid if I started going there, I would explode. Like if I, all of this stuff is being held like by Hoover Dam. All of my pain, all of my anger, all of my fear, all of it was just like this massive dam blocked inside me. And I was terrified that if I started going in there, it would just gush out all at once, and I wouldn't be able to handle it. Right. And that was really scary to me. Fortunately, it doesn't work that way.
That's right.
I mean, it's not an easy process. It's a painful process, but it is not so explosive as I had anticipated it being. Right. And it's so worth it. I mean,
right.
Especially because once I had the people, I had I had Elizabeth, I had the right kind of practitioners and healers and people who like knew how to do their stuff, and they were experts in it, and they were doing the work themselves, you know, so they really walked their talk, and they had the insights and the capacity to hold space for me and to hold space for my pain. So I didn't have to hold it all myself. They
Yeah, I
had the
know.
capacity to be a strong support system and be a guide, so that I wasn't just left floundering, like, okay, I have this trauma in front of me and I don't know what to do with it, and I'm left floundering and re-traumatized. I instead had someone who was there and said, okay, here, I'm here with you, and I'm witnessing this with you, and I'm holding you with love and kindness and compassion, and I'm giving you tools to help you process this and help you
Right.
heal this, so that you can get out of this stuck place and grow and
Yeah.
become healthy. And that was life-changing.
Yeah, that's right. It's amazing, really. I mean, I had a similar experience. The idea of digging in kind of scared the crap out of me too. I I thought, you got to be shitting me. You want me to take all this stuff that I have spent so much time and energy hiding away, and you want me to just bring it out, and no, I don't think so. That's not going to happen. But then I got to witness other people doing this kind of work. And I think the reason that I was so afraid was not so much about when it starts coming out, it'll never stop, or it's going to destroy me, or anything. Nothing like that really came to my mind. My biggest concern was how, when you see this stuff, you're really going to hate me. You're going to expel me. You're going to get rid of me. You're going to you'll never have anything to do with me, and I will die alone. That was the thought process for me.
Well, and that
That's a pretty,
too, for me, was another layer of it. You know, it was like,
yeah,
if I expose my vulnerability, you will turn your back on me.
exactly. Yeah,
You will walk away from me. You won't. So, having somebody actually be present with me in my mess, in my
right.
pain, in my shadow, in my bad habits, and all of it, and have people like to actually be present with me and still love me through it,
Right.
was magic.
Yeah. Magic is a
Amazing.
good word for it, you know. But anyway, that was what kept me from doing it. The fear of the judgment and the fear of dying alone. Uh,
Mhm.
Once I saw other people doing this work, and I saw that the observers were not running away or
Mhm.
doing anything of the kind that I had imagined, that helped me to get enough courage to try it myself. And I'll say that my first few shadow work processes, they were good, they were helpful, but I wasn't really allowing myself to go really deep.
Mhm.
That didn't happen until May of 2003, when I was at a men's retreat called the New Warrior Training Adventure. And I was surrounded by 40 men. And I watched other men get up and do their work. And there was a lot of deep process work. Well, when I got up, I had this facilitator. He just kind of walked up to me and he said, "David, what would you like to have happen today?" And I said, "I just want, I can't even remember the words I used, honestly, but it was something along the lines of, I just want to, I want to be accepted for who I am." And so he started asking a few questions to help me move in the direction of getting clearer about who I am. And then all of a sudden, the dam broke. That the inner rage that was inside me just started coming out. I mean, it was loud, it was messy. Someone handed me a tennis racket I didn't even notice, and some pillows in front of me, and I just started wailing away on these pillows. They weren't pillows in my mind, though. In my mind, it was my mother, my father, it was God, it was everything in the world that I blamed for the horrible state of my life. Well, after a while, there was nothing left, and I had no energy left. And I remember saying, "That's it. That's all I got." And then someone said, "Well, what do you want to have happen now?" And I said, "I just want to be loved for who I am." And that's when the tears came. Oh my God. tears, snot, you name it. And a man showed up, and he just took the role of my ideal mom, I guess, and just kind of held me in his arms as I was unloading this stuff. Wow, I'm feeling it right now.
Mm.
But when that was all over, when I was able, and by the way, it sounds like a long, painful process. Well, it was uncomfortable, but really it wasn't painful. None of my body parts hurt. None of my heart didn't hurt. My stomach was cramped while I was trying to get all this stuff out. But after that was over, I felt amazing. I couldn't talk anymore. I'd been screaming so much. My voice was gone. But when that was done, the facilitator came up to me and he says, "And so what's true about you now, David?" And I said something like, I am an amazing, magnificent being of light and love, and I'm here to help heal the world. Something like that. And I couldn't believe I said that. But as I said that, my heart and my chest and everything just started filling up with this beautiful, warm, blue gold energy. And what's more, as I looked around the room at the other men, their faces kind of disappeared, and all I could see was that same gold blue energy, flowing between us. And it was going even beyond that circle out to the world. I could just feel it. And I thought, holy shit, people need to know about this. Because I think in that moment, I realized I'm never going to hide myself ever again for anybody else. I'm not going to pretend to be something just to please someone else. I'm not even going to defer my wants and needs just so you can get your wants and needs met. I remember making that vow to myself. I said, from now on, I am who I am. You don't like it, that's okay. That's your issue. And maybe if you don't like it, it's because you need to do some work for yourself. So anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to steal the show there, but it was just coming up, and I wanted to share that because the beauty of that experience, I cannot explain in words. I have tried. I've written multiple chapters in multiple books, and I've tried to talk about this, and each time it comes out a little different. But you said it. It's magic. And magic of the best possible kind. When you do this work, when you allow yourself to have the vulnerability to just release the truth of who you really are into the world, all of a sudden things change.
Yeah.
Now, it doesn't mean everybody's going to like it. Not at all. Some people may hate your guts still. Well, that's their stuff. Has nothing to do with you.
Right.
Thank you for letting me share that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That was very powerful. It just speaks to how potent it is to be held in a container of compassion.
Yeah.
And a space of love and acceptance, because that's how we're able to do this work. Right. Like, we're not free to go into the deeper shadows without a safe container. But when you have, whether it's one person or a group of people, surrounding you with love and compassion and accepting you in your pain, in your vulnerability, in your shame. So much of the shadow is shame, in your shame. And they're saying, I love you just as you are. It's okay. Then that is the magic of it, is the love and compassion and that safety, so that we can go in to those spaces that hurt and those spaces where we feel shame, and we can express, in the way you so beautifully show, express the anger and the rage and the whatever it is that's inside of you that needs to be expressed, and it's witnessed.
Right.
And somebody's there looking at you and holding space for that and saying, yeah, it's okay. I get it. And I still see you and I still hold you even in that.
Yeah.
So powerful.
And I think the thing that people forget, that one event was definitely the single most powerful healing event I've ever had in my life. And it was powerful for sure. But even though I expressed a lot of rage and sadness and sorrow and shame and everything else that came out, all of this happened within the space of about 30 minutes. 30 minutes. It might feel like a lifetime while you're going through it, but 30 minutes. 30 minutes. Think about that in terms of a lifetime. So what I realize is that I got rid of a lot. I mean, I would say a good 90 to 95% of all the rage that had been built up inside of me over the years, but I didn't get rid of it all. You know, there's still some left. There's still some work that I'm continuing to do. And I also noticed that today, I still have an ego mind. I haven't eliminated that, but I am much more, as you said so eloquently before, I am much more aware of it now. So even though I get angry, I don't just blow off like I used to. I will actually stand in my anger and I'll say something like, I'm feeling really angry right now and I've got all these judgments about you and everything else. I think it'd be a good time for me to go for a walk. And then we can talk later or something like that. Whereas before, I would just vomit all this anger and just, that's not helping anybody. So.
And therein lies the evolution, to go
That's
from
right.
raging to being able to name it and claim it and say, okay, I'm feeling anger. I'm feeling these things. And this is how I'm going to deal with it. You can be present with it. And that's amazing.
Yeah, that's right. So, well, we've had a lot of talk about our personal experience with shadow and shadow work and all that kind of stuff. For the people who are watching, and I see Kathleen has joined us. Hello, Kathleen. You're welcome to put comments or questions in the chat if you like. We will do our best to respond to those. I guess maybe we should briefly define what the hell is shadow anyway, so people have an understanding of what we're talking about. Do you have a definition that works for you?
Essentially, the shadow is the aspects of ourselves that we have disowned and abandoned. It's parts of ourselves that we've fragmented and hid away from the world. And we've done this for a lot of reasons. And it's an unconscious process, generally speaking. But when, we live in a world where there's a lot of judgment, there's a lot of societal norms and expectations. There's a lot of messaging around who we are and who we're allowed to be and who we're not allowed to be and what is acceptable and what is not. And through traumas and various life experiences and all of this messaging that we receive from infancy and beyond that tells us we're not okay, we learn that we have to hide who we are. We have to hide parts of who we are. And so it becomes this, instead of it just a natural, brilliant expression of self, it becomes this dark aspect that is repressed and shoved away in the shadows. It's like, imagine, it becomes sick, basically, because we repress this part of ourselves. We don't allow it to be expressed, and therefore we have to use a lot of energy to hide it. We have a lot of fear around it because it's not okay for me to be this way. It's not okay for me to feel this way. It's not okay for me to think this way or act this way or have these desires, and it just becomes a toxic expression and it comes out sideways. So as an example, sexuality is a huge shadow aspect of our culture. We build so much shame around sexuality and healthy sexual expression that it creates so many conflicts, internal conflicts within people. Women, you're not allowed to be sexual. If you're sexual, then you're a slut. Or there's something wrong with you, or you're trying to get something, or so many messages. And so there's aspects of our culture that repress sexuality as a whole, and it's like you look at some religious cultures that sexuality is not okay at all. And so what do we have as a result of that? Because we have to hide our sexual desires, our natural sexual expression. And so we have to lock that away and put it in the shadow. And then that comes out as very twisted sexual expression, where there's
a lot of pornography and stuff like that. Yep.
Pornography and sexual abuse and so many things. So many ways that we can look at in our culture where sexuality has just become so twisted. So we've taken this beautiful expression of human experience and love and passion and turned it into something dark and shameful and bad
and ugly.
And yeah, and that's the shadow. That's the shadow expression of what it is. So we have these aspects of ourselves that we have been shamed about. We've been told in some way or another, or we've interpreted that it's wrong and it's not allowed. So therefore we hide it and we don't express it.
Right.
And it builds up pressure.
I think though that we put some good things into shadow as well.
Yeah.
If you happen to be really good at math, let's say, and somebody makes fun of you because you are good at math, and this happens when you're a kid. You're a nerd, you're a geek, you're this or that or something else. So you then try to hide your math smarts or other smarts because you want to fit in. You want to be part of the group. You want to, so you put it aside, you hide it. Maybe you start getting D's in school. I don't know. Yep. The thing is, we take some of our beautiful gifts and we hide those away too for the same reason. Because someone that we treat as an authority figure in our life, even if it's just another kid or another person of the same, in one of our peers, we treat that voice as the voice of authority and we listen to it, and that's what causes us to hide that part of ourselves. Mm-hmm. But I have a little kind of a fun metaphor that I use to describe shadows in general. This is something that came to me when I was doing my own work. And I used to think, my shadows are like my children, my kids. While I'm awake, they're little angels. They behave perfectly all the time. But the moment I go to bed, those shadows are up and about, sneaking out of the house at night, toilet papering the neighbor's house. And the next day someone comes to me. They know exactly who did it, but I'm saying, my kids? No way. That's kind of how shadows behave. They sneak out in the background when you're least expecting it. And that's when it gets embarrassing.
Yeah, they come out sideways.
That's right.
They become a toxic expression of themselves.
That's right.
So you do have, as you put out, the aspects of self that go into the shadow are not bad. And that's where the fear of doing shadow work comes from, is because we feel like it's bad. We've built up such a big story around it and so much shame around it that we think like, I can't do this. If I do this, I'm going to be rejected. I'm going to be shamed. I'm going to be, judged. I'm going to, whatever our story is around it. I'm going to lose my family. I'm going to lose my respect or my status or, any number of things. But the actual part of ourselves that goes into the shadow, like Kathleen mentioned, hiding musical talents. She didn't want to be a band nerd. Like hiding your creativity is such a big one for people. Right. Hiding your voice. I mean, hiding your emotions. Your emotions is another big one. For me, I was raised with the don't cry or I'll give you something to cry about story.
Oh God, so, yeah, I heard that too. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right.
You know, so I wasn't allowed to cry. I wasn't allowed to be sad. I certainly was not allowed to be angry. Oh, no, 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 no. There's no
I
anger
know.
allowed in that home. Um, you know, so all of that would just became repressed, and that came out, you know, so like anger for me, for example, came out as passive aggression and sometimes as rage. It also primarily for me came out as self-abuse and
Mm.
self-harm. You know, and then you know, my other emotions also were just turned inward, you know, into self-harm. And that's we might have, Kathleen, we definitely might have grown up in the same family.
Listen, I had
Yeah,
the
but
same thing. I think we all grew up in the same family, to be honest. You know,
yeah.
or the same, a slight variation of the same family.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so back to what I was saying though, like the actual part of ourselves that goes into the dark is not bad, but we think it is because that's how we interpret. I actually witnessed, not you know, a few years back, I was at a family event and there was a kid, young boy. I think he was like 6 around at the time, and he's dancing around to music, having a great time. And I witnessed this. His father shut him down because boys don't dance.
Yeah.
And I'm watching this and going, oh my goodness, like he is just like locking down his child from his own self-expression, you know.
Yeah.
And the father is, his response was his own fear. You know, in this case it was homophobia. He was afraid, like, if a boy dances, then what if he's gay?
Right.
So he wants to stop anything that the boy might do or be interested in and turn it into something toxic because he might be something that I think I'm afraid of, you know, and locks down the boy's sexual, or, you know, sorry, nice, not sexual expression, but his creative expression and his
Sure.
joy. You know, he's just having fun. He's
Yeah.
enjoying his body. He's dancing around, having a great time, and suddenly he's in trouble for it.
Right. And you know, so that was a pretty explicit example of how a parent can uh, project his own fear or her own fear onto a child and stop
Mhm.
a certain behavior out of that fear.
Yeah.
That's an explicit example of it. But this
Hmm.
can happen much more subtly in a family environment. It doesn't have to be explicit like that. You know, for example, you know, you could be sitting at dinner, just quietly having dinner, and maybe dad says to mom, "Hey, did you hear about that kid down the street? He's some kind of a gay dude because he's dancing." Wow. If now I'm thinking, I love dancing, and now it means I'm gay and gay is bad. That's the kind of situation that's happening. So if I'm going to dance, dad can never know about it, or
Yeah.
mom, or whoever. This is
Yeah.
kind of how it starts. Just a very,
Hmm.
very simple situation like that. But we take a message and we internalize it and we direct it to ourselves. And then that causes us to push aside that quality or that aspect into
Hmm.
a place of darkness so it doesn't show up in the real world.
Right. Yeah, I actually had a conversation just recently. Um, there was this was a friend of mine, and she had this was over the holiday, and there was a family across the street. There was 2 women who were trying to back a trailer into the driveway and struggling with it a little bit. And her mother-in-law was standing in the window having a conversation with her son, um, about how girls shouldn't drive trailers. You know, girls shouldn't be able to do that because they can't. You know, girls shouldn't even be allowed to try. Like, that is creating a shadow too, just the cultural
Sure.
narrative around gender identity and who can and who can't, and who's capable and who's not. You know,
Yep.
it's oftentimes very, very subtle. You know, and broaden it out into the media and all sorts of messages going on there about what's good and bad.
Yep.
I mean, even
That's
like
right.
my hair. There's a lot of movies out there where the girl with the curly hair is like the ugly girl, and then she evolves and she straightens her hair and suddenly she's beautiful,
Hmm.
you know. But the girl with the curly hair, not cool.
Right. Right.
Yes,
Yeah,
there's so
you're
many.
right. Some of these messages are really in your face, and some of them are
Mhm.
quite subtle.
Yeah.
Um, right. And so as individuals, obviously we can't live our lives
Exactly.
terrified of our shadows. That's just not going to work. We've proven that time and time again. So I think what we need to do is we need to learn to help people find a way to do the the anthropology. No, what's the word I'm thinking here?
Excavation,
Excavation. That's the word.
which is an archaeological dig. Yeah.
Or archaeological dig or whatever, to find the truths of who they really are. To uncover that stuff, bring back the gifts that are associated with those, and release any negative energy we have about that part in the first place. And that's what the whole process of shadow work is, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, as I said at the beginning, and I think you've said it as well, it comes down to knowing the whole truth about who you really are and then loving all of that.
Yeah.
It's a journey for sure.
Yeah. It definitely is. And it's definitely a journey of self-awareness, because we're not generally conscious of our shadows. We don't, unless you've been doing a lot of inner work, you're not necessarily aware of the problems that the shadow self is creating for yourself. It's more of just this unconscious energy running in the background that wreaks havoc in your life from time to time, which just furthers the repression of it. But that the journey of cultivating self-awareness around it is a really huge piece of that too. Like starting to recognize those patterns and looking at those parts of yourself that you judge, those parts of yourself that what do you carry shame around? And what kind of patterns of behaviors do you have around that? And that's kind of the excavation, is going into those spaces and looking at that. And as you said, holding yourself with love and compassion.
Right.
As you meet that part of yourself.
Right. So how do we encourage people? I mean, what do you suppose we can identify as gifts and wisdom of the shadow that people can hope to obtain for themselves? I mean, I can speak for my own gifts and wisdom. What do you say to people who are just kind of thinking of doing this work?
I was just looking at Denise, red curly hair. Yeah. The redheaded stepchild. You got that plus the curly hair. I totally hear it. So, I mean, the gifts that's kind of part of the journey too, is looking at, what is that shadow piece and what are the gifts within this? So I think to answer this, it might be easier to have, if we can pick up specific shadow and start looking at it. So for example, we've talked about sexuality, we've talked about creativity, we've talked about emotions and anger. So pick one.
All right. I'll speak to one of my own. One that I'm very aware of is a shadow of arrogance. And I can share with you what I think the gifts are in that, but I'd like to hear your perspective on it.
Okay. So arrogance would be the shadow expression of self-confidence, right? And so the messaging, perhaps, and I'm going to speculate here, but the messaging that you might have received would be perhaps either shaming types of messaging around confidence, like high confidence, or shaming messages around lack of confidence, or maybe a bit of both. Shaming messages about people and their personal power. Arrogance is basically a repressed aspect of healthy power, healthy confidence, right? Mm-hmm. So when you are in a space of healthy confidence, you exude confidence, but you exude an energy about you of self-containment. You exude an energy about you of owning your self-worth, owning your value, owning the gifts that you have to share on the world, and owning it in a way that is inclusive. Not I am better than you because, but rather this is who I am. This is my authentic self. These are the gifts that I have, right? So when the shadow side of that being arrogance is when that there is insecurity around your confidence, insecurity around your sense of personal power. So those are the things that are actually in the shadow. And then the arrogance is like coming out sideways to protect whatever this is that I'm hiding.
Yeah,
That makes
that's
sense?
interesting. Yep, I agree with all of that. There's another aspect to arrogance that comes to
Mm-hmm.
my mind. I mean, whenever I have a judgment of somebody being arrogant, I notice there's a part of me that's saying he thinks he knows it all. He thinks that he has all the answers, or she, whatever, whoever I'm referring to, has all the answers, knows it all. And here's something else. I want people to understand something. Sometimes, for a particular situation or topic or event, you are the smartest person in the room. You know more about it than anybody else does.
Mm-hmm.
So owning that awareness and knowledge doesn't make you arrogant, even though someone else might be insecure by your awareness of your knowledge of that.
Mm-hmm.
So often you see that I say, own your arrogance, own it, because there's some beautiful power in it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to come across as arrogant. You don't have to come across with the energy of, I know more than you, so shut up.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to come across that way. What you can do instead is you can take that knowledge and you might ask someone a question like, well, have you thought about this?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about this idea? Instead of saying, well, you're wrong and I can prove it because I know this. That's you can express your knowledge and your confidence without knocking someone else down. It's the same thing with, they tell you to shine your light, and many people are afraid to shine their light because someone else is going to go dim as a result.
Mm-hmm.
I say, wrong-o. If you were a star in the night sky, would you shut down your light so other stars could seem brighter? Or would you encourage them to shine more brightly?
Mm-hmm.
Which would you do? What do you think is the most beneficial response in general for that kind of thing? I say, you don't have to be dim because I'm bright. You go ahead and shine your light as brightly as you want, but do it in a compassionate and humble way, because then you're showing up as an authentic being and not as a shadow being.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And with that aspect of dimming yourself, or either over amplifying or under amplifying your confidence, your knowledge, your wisdom, like those are really perfect examples of how that expresses a shadow. If you're knowledgeable about something and you're sharing with others and you're imparting your wisdom, there's no judgment about, you're not carrying judgment about those people who don't know the same things that you do. You're inviting them into the conversation. You're not trying to be like, I'm proving you wrong. It's just, we're going to have a conversation here.
Right.
And I'm going to share who I am and what I have to offer. And I'm going to share my light, as you say, with you. And I invite you to share your light too. And that, that brings, from a power perspective, it's power with dynamic.
Right.
I have power, you have power, versus I have power and therefore you don't.
Right.
Type of dynamic.
Yeah, that's right. Beautiful. Well, Linda, we're getting close to the top of the hour here. This has been an absolutely amazing conversation. I mean, we have covered so much ground, and I can't believe that we're almost out of time. So I want to thank you, first of all, for being here and sharing your wisdom with us. And before I close us out for the day, I'd like to give you a chance to offer any additional wisdom that you'd like to share. And also if you have a gift that you'd like people to know about.
Yeah. So one of the things that I want to share, because as we touched on this, there can be a lot of fear and apprehension around doing the deeper inner work and going in and doing the shadow work. And I just want to reinforce, as we've been talking about, there are so many gifts in this process. I mean, it is powerful and it really does change your life. And it's okay to be nervous about it, but don't let that stop you. Find people who you can surround yourself that are safe, that can guide you and support you, that create that safe container, like we talked about with your example, when you were in a community of people who held that container for you. And it doesn't have to be a whole community like David's experience, but whether it's an individual practitioner or it's with a community of like a women's circle or a men's circle, or just a community of safe friends and loved ones, but find people who can help support you in that process, so that you're not alone with it and left out floundering, because that love and support and compassion creates a container within which you can go into those deeper, more vulnerable spaces. And that's really important. But definitely don't be afraid to do it. Just make sure you have the right people around you as you do it.
Right.
So
yeah, beautiful. And I know that you do this work one-on-one with people. Is that right?
I do.
Yeah. So do you have a link to a place where people can go and find out more and maybe sign up for a session with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me put my website in the chat. It's wellnessandharmony.com. And the shadow work falls under integrated energy healing is the type of modality. It also falls under the coaching work that I do and the chakra healing work that I do. So if that's something that you're looking to venture into, those would be the modalities to look for.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And of course, all my work is associated with shadow work, even though I don't necessarily use that word to describe it. So I'm happy to help out anybody who's looking to uncover some beautiful, wonderful gifts that you maybe have hidden away. So thank you for being here again. Linda, it's just been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed this conversation. And I'd like to remind, the people who are here and also people who are watching the recording, the journey into the shadow deepens empathy and compassion for others. When you confront your own imperfections and struggles, you become more understanding of the flaws and challenges that other people have. So ultimately, exploring the psychic shadow is your path to liberation, believe it or not. It allows you to reclaim the fullness of your being, shedding old limitations and stepping into a life of greater authenticity, empowerment, and joy. Thank you all for watching today's program. Remember, you can catch the recordings of this and every other episode on my website at lifemasterytv.com. And before I close out, I want to remind you to practice my life mastery mantra every single day. It goes like this. I gratefully forgive the imperfect being I have been in the past. I gratefully accept the magnificent being I am right now. I gratefully welcome the evolved being I am becoming in each new moment. So until we meet again, my name is David McLeod, your life mastery coach, wishing you love, light, and blessings on your continuing journey. See you next time on Life Mastery TV. Bye-bye.
Thank you.